I'm
Ready.
ready to get going. All right. Well, I'm so happy to have everybody here today. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. We do this every Tuesday at 12:30. So glad you can join us today. We've got some wonderful guests in Kim Lapidus and Rita Pfeiffer. You're both SLPs, right? Yes.
Yes.
And you're going to talk to us about such an important topic, alternative augmentative communication. Did I get that right? Is that what's the acronym? Yeah. And this is such a key aspect of everything that we do within the IDD community, because communication is the key to pretty much everything that we do, right? So it's very, very important that we approach this in a diligent manner. So I'm so glad to have you two guys here as guests today with the Clinical Consultation Network. Babs, do we have any other information we need to share before they get started?
Just that we'll have them on for 2 weeks, and then we'll have our NAD collaboration at the end of the month.
And do we know who our NAD collaborator is yet?
I was muted. It's Denise Wolf. I'm sorry, I was muted.
That's right. And Denise, of course, she's been on before. This will be her second time on with us. She was instrumental in putting together the position paper that NAD had on police interventions. And so we're very happy to have her back as a board member. She's a board member on the NAD board, and she's going to be with us on that fourth Tuesday of the month. I usually say the fourth Thursday for some reason, maybe because it's the fourth day of the work week, but in any case, it's the fourth Tuesday of the month that we collaborate with NAD and have a national feature on those days. But we're also glad to have our weekly features with our local Tennessee folks too. So it's great either way. Skill Building Co-op.
Yep.
Tell me more about this, Babs.
Yeah, the skill building coach.
This is you already getting ready.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's us.
excellent then. Before we launch into your presentation, though, how about if you two guys introduce yourselves?
Sure.
Kim?
I'm Kim Lapidus. I am a private SLP, speech language pathologist. Started my business back in 2006. Fell in love with augmentative and alternative communication when a client approached me. I'm from Texas, Dallas, Texas. I'm actually a Rangers fan. I'm also a Cowboys fan, and I am on a mission to hit every national park I can get to in my lifetime. That's my new mission.
So what are some of the ones you've been to?
I've been to Zion, Yellowstone, Rushmore. Those are my big ones. And now the Canadian Rockies. And I just can't get enough.
Yeah. You hadn't been to Yosemite yet.
I've not been to Yosemite yet. No.
Yeah, me neither. That's on my bucket list to go there.
Definitely.
But, and so you were a Rangers fan. Well, we benefit, you may not realize this, but the Braves benefit from the Rangers because Ron Washington used to be the manager of the Rangers, and he is now one of the coaches for the Braves.
Nice.
And he is one of my favorite people on their team. So good Rangers connection there.
Nice.
And so, okay, thank you for that, Kim. And Rita?
Hi, my name is Rita Pfeiffer. I'm also a speech language pathologist. I work at the Skill Building Co-op, and then I also work at the IDD through Middle Tennessee Homes and the Harold Jordan Center. And speaking of traveling fun facts, I would love to get into backpacking. So I'm going backpacking with a friend in a couple months in the Grand Tetons. And then my ultimate goal will be backpacking in the Grand Canyon. I think would be really cool. I've never been there before.
Oh, yeah. I got to go to the Grand Canyon a few years ago, and we took one of those helicopter tours, and then landed down in the bottom of the canyon, and we had a little wine tasting down there. It was a little bit of a frou-frou thing, but it was still a lot of fun. And you got to see really, a great view of the canyon. I think it would be a great trip to take. So, well, thank you for that. Now, let me just kind of back off here and let you guys jump in and do your thing. I'll probably rudely interrupt you from time to time, but you'll be able to handle that. So just turn it over to you guys, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, chime in whenever you want to, Bruce.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the Skill Building Co-op. Established in 2006. We've been through a whole lot of technology since 2006. We've seen a lot, and there's so much out there and so much to learn about, and we're super excited to share what we have learned so far.
And so we have a little slogan called Educate, Incorporate, and Communicate. We'll talk a little bit about how we apply that, but that's kind of our tagline, especially for people that use communication devices. But the business also does some tutoring services too.
All right, repeat that again. What was the three things? Educate,
Incorporate, Communicate.
Educate, incorporate, communicate. All right, I've got that. I'm gonna write those down so I don't forget. And I do want to remind our audience too, if they have questions as you're going through this, to put them in the chat, or they can just come off mute and ask their questions if they need to, if they prefer to. And so, then we'll stop periodically and review questions in the chat box. Okay.
Great.
Launch in.
And
educate, incorporate, and what was the last one again?
Communicate.
Communicate. Educate, incorporate, communicate. We've repeated it enough times now. You can proceed.
Very good.
Good.
Hey, everybody. This is Salita. We got so into the national parks thing that I don't know that I caught the interesting fact from both of you.
So my interesting fact,
Say it.
yes, my interesting fact is that I am on a mission to hit.
Right.
I fell in love with the national parks when I was 40 years old, and now I'm on a mission to hit as many national parks as I can.
Well, you look like you're 18, so hopefully your longevity will see you through that mission.
Thank you.
Thank you. And my fun fact was that I'm starting to get into backpacking, and I would love to
Okay.
the canyon.
And then Bruce, are you gonna do a Get Smarticle at the end of the deal?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to tell everybody about that. So these guys have got so much content that I've got to let them get to that we're not going to have time for a Get Smarticle today or next week. So we will resume that in 2 weeks from today. But for the next 2 weeks, we won't have a Get Smarticle.
Okay, well, I just wanted to check because I do enjoy those.
I do appreciate you mentioning that, though. That's excellent, and asking about it. So thank you so much.
Yes, and we'll be able to dive into a resource today that will kind of act as a Get Smarticle. And that's going to be a part of our journey. We are now boarding on this flight to AAC. It's a little hokey, but we promise it's fun. So you might be wondering, what is AAC? And for those of you that don't know, AAC is a term that means augmentative and alternative communication. It's kind of a long term. Basically, what it means is that we're talking about communication supports, and there's different kinds of communication supports. So there's augmentative, so that means it's anything that supports verbal communication. So you're able to communicate verbally, but you just need a little added support. There's also alternative communication. So that's when verbal communication isn't an option. It provides another means by which you can communicate. But ultimately, with whatever supports you use, communication is the goal. So whatever helps to be able to say everything that you need to say and want to say and how you want to say it, that's the goal of AAC, or augmentative alternative communication. And there's different kinds of augmentative and alternative communication. So we all use these forms through facial expressions, body language, gestures. There's also sign language. that could be used. There's communication boards, there's switches. What we focus on in our practice is high-tech communication devices, and we'll see some examples of what that looks like.
Yes. All right. So the luxury of having a private practice in the city of Nashville is that I am able to, we are able to help our clients, well, first educate the community around our clients, educate our clients, educate team members in the school workspaces, to help everybody understand how these devices work, incorporate the devices into their everyday activities so that ultimately these users can go out and communicate, whether they're at home, at the doctor's, enjoying a meal out, shopping, working, at church, temple, just any activities of daily living.
Definitely. And I think that's why one thing that's great about being able to have that too is just you realize how much language is needed, not just for your one-on-one session in a therapy room, but like what is the language they need for ordering food at Panera? Like what is language that they need to be able to enjoy a game night with friends? You know, we think in terms of like having inclusion opportunities that, you know, you just put someone in a room and they're able to participate. But one of the things that's so important is that they need to have the tools and the language to be able to participate in all of these different places that we
Yes.
participate in all the time. So it just provides opportunity for that. And then that's when you realize that communication is not a destination. We just kind of think of like, okay, someone's able to communicate and that's good. Right. But you realize like you talk to your boss versus talking with your best friend versus talking with an acquaintance. The language that you need is so different for all of those places. And it's also different depending on if you're 5 years old versus if you're 45. The language that you need
That's right.
is
It's
different.
forever evolving.
You know, and this is such an important thing to recognize because we often will say, okay, somebody can make their wants and needs known, but that's so nondescript, really, of the variety of different communications that you need to have. And one of the things, like an area that, from my particular discipline, is being able to communicate your emotions or being able to tell people about how you're feeling about something or you know, some internal state. So there's a lot of different dimensions of communication, it seems.
Well, it's about building relationships and building your network and your community and being able to have a role in your place in that community, and feeling like you're heard. You want to be heard.
And that's why it's a journey of making connections.
There we go. Love it.
Yes. And so you think about like, what do you need to be able to make those connections? Like, what are the connections?
Yes. So it's really important that you understand who your client is and what their values are. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and chime in, what do you want to know, or what do you think you would need to know about your client in order to program the devices and have the language ready for them? What would you like to know about them? We'll do a little Q&A here.
What they like.
Okay,
Yes.
yes.
That's true.
Michelle says what they like. So we're going to give you some ideas.
Okay. One I was going to bring up, okay, areas that need support that Michelle brought up there. Another one that I can think of is understanding a little bit about their cultural background. Maybe, you know, that probably helps you understand a little bit more about what's important to them. But that's another thing. What their daily routine is, Jennifer brought up. Let's see, there were a couple of others that I thought were mentioned there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we'll give you some ideas too. Go ahead.
Yeah. So
Hobbies, interests.
yeah, activities, hobbies, interests. That's true. Like, where do they go in the community?
Are they in school? Are they students? Are they in elementary versus high school versus college?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What kind of classes are they in? What are activities that they do within school? Friends? Like, do they have friends? Are they like, who do they want to be friends?
Do they need help making friends?
Yeah. healthcare needs, talking about areas of support, you kind of have to know, what is their medical profile to be able to
And they need the language to be able to communicate with their caregivers in terms of self-advocacy, advocacy skills in there.
like, do they have access to family? And like, what are their like family routines and traditions?
Work, job site skills.
Cultural backgrounds.
Yep.
And I think Selena mentioned about being overly monitored too. I think that's a great point about, like so many of our people want to be more independent. So being able to have the skills to advocate and be able to get skills and language to be able to participate.
Somebody just mentioned a question about how do you manage the new things that our clients might approach. Managing the technology is an evolution. It is a work in progress. We are constantly, kids or adults are faced with something new, and then they need the language to participate in that new activity, and we program as we go. And that's part of learning the operational skills that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Talking about where they hang out. Dislikes, yes. So many talk about what makes someone bonkers. They got to be able to express frustration, right? Like, I don't want to do that. Leave me alone.
Yep.
And then also like goals, like what are things they're excited about doing or want to be able to do in the future? Because ultimately, in this journey, there's goals or things that they want to be able to do. A lot of them, as we talked about, want to have that independence, and be able to not have someone speak for them all the time. They need to be able to have the job skills, and it's hard to have job skills if you can't interact and communicate.
And then just to be part of that community and to have a role and to feel heard, loved, and wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So now we are going to think about things that we might need for the journey, because I think sometimes, like, I know for me, like, I focus so much on like, oh, this is my client and this is what they need, and I want to make sure all of their needs are met, that sometimes I forget that like I have to have skills, right? Like I have to take some things along with me in order for me to be successful and supporting them on their journey, because we're taking the journey together. Like I'm learning just as much as they are learning, and they're teaching me just as much. So, and so of course, having a background and understanding communication is very important, and so is being able to listen, to our clients and what they're saying.
Yep.
But there's other things that we may need for the,
like what, Rita?
like what? CCN. Does anybody have insight? To be a communication partner, what are some things that we might need?
Well, I'll tell you, while people are putting in their comments, I'm going to give you an example of a circumstance where I had completely misunderstood. I sort of made an assumption about what a person needed when it wasn't really what they needed in this instance. And it was only by listening over a long period of time, listening not just to their verbal communications, but also how they responded to things, to really understand. And so in this particular case, the woman had a relationship with her mother, and her mother was not a very nice person. And it was a pretty negative relationship in many ways. And I spent a lot of time trying to talk her out of this relationship with her mother, but it was really something that was at the core important to her. And so what I ended up having to do was learn to facilitate the relationship with her mother and try to work with that rather than trying to get rid of it. And so, that was an example of listening to someone and trying to design what I'm doing around what her goals are rather than my own.
Yeah, that's a really big point there. Yeah, and I think that hits on a number of things, that we realized that we've kind of needed to pack along for this journey. Like the motivation and perseverance to say, like, just to keep going no matter the obstacles, and just knowing that like when the obstacles come, that you're just going to persevere through and figure out a way. and having a positive attitude and patience. This is not a quick journey. It's a life journey of a lifetime. So just keeping positive and having patience
Yes.
throughout.
Let's see. You have to have a vision. You have to have an idea of what you want for your client so that you can help them get there. And it doesn't have to be a detail. It doesn't have to be a detail, but this idea that they're going to be part of something, and it's our responsibility to help them lay it out so that they can live their best life.
And just like what you said too, with like making sure that we're keeping their vision in mind for what's important for them. I think where did it go? There it is. Flexibility. Just like what Dr. Davis you shared, that like you think that you're going to go in one direction and you realize, oh, I need to go this other way. That happens pretty often, and so that's why you have to have curiosity, and just exploring the options, and humility that you're not going to know everything. Like, this technology changes all the time, our perspective changes all the time, their perspective changes, so we just have to just give everybody a little bit of grace, that this is a journey that we all need to take together.
That's right. Okay.
And fun.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
A little boomerang there.
Definitely has to be fun. And with all of those in our back pocket, we've got to find a way to measure progress over time. Using a new, go back to that. Sorry. Yeah, we're going to take the augmentative and alternative communication profile. We're going to stick it in our suitcase with us because it's going to allow us to take this big idea of taking a nonverbal client or a minimally verbal client and all of a sudden make them communicate. And you got to find a place to start, and you've got to be able to measure progress over time. So this is where we break down the whole use of augmentative and alternative communication into 4 different user competencies. And this profile, not only does it measure the progress over time of the user, but it also helps break down the competencies of the communication partners as well. This is offered by Linguist Systems. The 4 competencies are operational. How do we operate the device? We're going to go into detail about these momentarily. Linguistic, social, and strategic. So we're going to go a little bit in depth into the first 2 competencies today. And then next week, if you join us again, we'll look more at the social and strategic.
Yes. And so let's get started with operational competencies. And so this is just being able to physically handle the device. So if you imagine, using any sort of device like your phone, right? Like, you're not going to be able to make a phone call unless you know, how do I turn the phone on? How do I press the buttons? So it's just like the technical skill of being able to use whatever device is given to you. And that's a core foundational need. Like, sometimes someone can't communicate because they haven't been given access based on how they operate the device. And as Kim mentioned, these are all competencies that have different levels. And so level 1 is just being able to be oriented to the device, understanding oh, there's a device here and it has some sort of purpose and I'm going to be able to look at it, right? And then level 2 is manipulation. So being able to understand oh, I can press the device and some things happen, all the way up to level 5 where they're actually programming the device themselves. Definitely recommend looking at this resource for more details on how that's all assessed. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go on this journey and see some examples of different ways that people can operate the device. So
this is the flight AAC that we're about to take here.
Yes.
That was the tagline for your presentation today.
Yes.
I remember.
Yes. So we hope.
I'll withhold my question until you go through this part.
Okay, I do want to tell you before we play this video, we're going to look at 3 different operational competencies. We're going to look at a client that is directly accessing the device through touch, by touching the screen and it speaking. We're going to look at a client who uses eye gaze to make the machine talk. And then we're going to look at a student that uses electromagnetic switch access to access his device. So, and I tell you that all three of those, they're very different extremes, because no matter how complex a body is, we have to find a way to give them access, no matter how hard the struggle is.
So this is the example of a gentleman, L, who uses direct access. So you see how he has his finger on the device. So that just means direct access. So he's able to use his finger to access the device.
You want to go to McDonald's? You just ate a snack. No, I don't want to leave right now.
So he loves desserts. He loves sweets. That's his go-to. But yeah, but you can see that's just one example of him having direct access. And if you're here next week, we'll get to talk about him and our adventures at restaurants. And so this is D.
Okay. So D is a child with cerebral palsy, very good cognitive skills intact, but has a very complex body, and started with a device at 4 years old, with very little direction from therapy. There was a long wait list, and they just did not know how to use the device. And 7 years later, he now is using his eyes to communicate. That's what this video is.
Oh, oops. I pressed the wrong button. My bad.
Hold on, sorry.
There we go. Okay.
What's your mom's name? Good. My mom is Stephanie.
There you go. So you could see whatever he was looking at was highlighting in red. And then when he looked at it long enough and kept his eyes on the screen long enough, it will speak.
Yeah. And so just speaking about like how important positioning is and being able to make that possible. So like whenever you have a chance to collaborate with a physical therapist, occupational therapy, to be able to stabilize his body enough so he has enough head and neck control to be able to look at the device, to be able to communicate.
And you can see his head is tilted. And so the device is also tilted. It's hanging off. It's kind of, it looks suspended in air right now, but it's actually tilted to meet the tilt in his head positioning.
So it can read his eye gaze. One of the things that occurred to me, and I think I've asked this question before, but I just want to ask it again. By the way, you already answered my original question, which was, how do people who can't manipulate things, because we think of that being manipulating with your hands, and you're showing us how people can do that without even having to use their hands. But in a situation like this, when they're using eye gaze to communicate, what prevents them from looking at the wrong thing in that circumstance?
That's a great question. That's all the process in therapy of, he has a very good yes/no response. So he can say something and I could say, did you mean to say whatever it is he said? And he'll shake, he'll kind of give me a wiggle no, or he'll stick out his tongue for a yes, and then I can confirm it. And then part of the journey for him is realizing, wait a minute, I said that, and she responded with, it's like when a toddler is learning to talk and they start babbling and they say something, and then we grasp onto what they say. And then we take what they say and put meaning around it. And so that's what I do with him. If he says something, it may not be what he meant to say, but I can put meaning to it, and then he can learn, oh, that button, I get that kind of response from, or that's what it is. So part of it is a teaching and just teaching the vocabulary and the exposure and using those mistakes as opportunities. And then other times it's, I'm really asking him a question and I really want to know the answer, and I really need to know if that's really what he wanted to say. And we use yes, no to confirm.
And then I think part of it is like teaching teaching operationally, like what is it, like what do I have to do to be able to select an icon? So I think it was like a while of like teaching, like, oh, if I look at this direction for this long, that means I'm going to select an item. But one thing that I like, you realize quickly in terms of eye gaze and in terms of like bodies that were made differently, is this is a lot of work to do this all day and to look at the screen and make sure your head's in the right position, your eyes in the right position to be able to select that icon. Wow, that is a lot of work.
And because it's a lot of work, he can fatigue easily. So this same little boy also wears the electromagnetic switch. We're going to look at that as well. So you're going to get to see how that works. You can see on the screen, there's a thing on his wrist with a little green light. And that little green light controls the screen. So we'll play this video and you'll see, you'll hear a beep, and that's him, and watch his pinky and ring finger. So sometimes the technology works, sometimes it doesn't.
But this is the neuronode, which, fun fact, we learned about the neuronode through the Clinical Consultation Network. So big thanks to you all for, having that presenter on, because we saw it, we're like, oh my gosh, this is for D. And now.
So Rita introduced me to the neuronode based on this presentation that she saw. And his technology, so insurance typically replaces devices every 5 years. He was due for a new device. And this is really the first time that he's had complete independent control of his words, even more so than the eye gaze. The eye gaze is a little temperamental. His head doesn't always stay in position. This has given him his first opportunity to really get to what he wants with control. And you'll see he's about to use the neuronode to control this screen with his yellow background.
And this is with his mom, and they're about to do some studying. Oh, oops. Sorry, everyone. Okay, there it is.
Yeah. Do you want to do your flashcards? Okay, we'll find them on your pocket. Next row. Ready, go.
So he's left that row.
Flashcard. Excellent. Excellent.
So he was very excited that he got to what he wanted. So you can see the buttons turned red. That's when he had to make it go. Then it went to the first row. He had to wait for the second row. Then he made it go. And then when the button flashcards was highlighted, he was able to click it again. So that is less work for him than having to keep his entire head in position, his entire trunk. He can just lay back and look wherever he wants to look and just wiggle those couple fingers. So it doesn't always work. It's not always perfect timing. It's a work in progress, but it's a journey. We're on it.
So kind of think it through a little bit. If you're going to use eye gaze, you've got to be able to hold your head relatively stationary for an extended period of time to be able to utilize that technology. But this technology here moves you beyond that, and you're able to use a different mechanism for this person to be.
But
exactly how does that work again, though? I'm not sure. Even though I saw this before on CCN, I need a little bit of a refresher on how this works. And you explained it, but just try explaining it one more time. Make sure that I've got it clear.
That mechanism on his wrist, the neuronode, is laying on a muscle on his arm. So if you just wiggle your last two fingers and put your fingertips, you can feel the muscle movement. That muscle movement is what's causing the device. You heard it beeping. So you know the two machines are connected. The neuronode's connected to the machine. And the machine is set on switch access. And so by choosing, you can choose direct access, you can choose eye gaze access, or you can choose switch access. This acts as a switch. So when he wiggles, it switches, it selects what he wants.
I totally remember it now. And it's so basically what you're trying to do is find where somebody has some voluntary control over something and utilizing that part of their body to help them communicate.
That's exactly right. We tried his knee. We tried you can see he's raising his right leg. So his whole thigh. We tried that. He got so excited he would over kick, and that did not work. We tried around his actual wrist, but this seems to be the best place for him. So yeah, it was definitely a lot of trial and error. And right now he's in a book club, and we read a book every week and discuss the book and talk about the feelings of the characters. And if he's able to engage and give his own opinions because he now has independent access. This is a child who spoke by for the first 11 years. Somebody would hold his hand and we would go across the screen, and then when he got to where he wanted, he would sort of punch, like sort of get excited, and that's how you knew what button he wanted. But that is how he if somebody wasn't there directing him, there was no way for him to communicate anything. So this is life changing for him. He's 11.
See that. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So another part of the journey or on your boarding pass is linguistic competence. And that just means language. So like being able to understand language, being able to express it, not just vocabulary, but the grammar and the syntax and the pragmatics of it. But an important part of this language piece is that it's not just about verbal communication. It's about them understanding the language or the code on their communication device. And not only that, they have to attend to both. So they have to listen to somebody that's communicating verbally and then be able to understand and then express that through their communication device. That's a lot. It's like almost like, two different kinds of language they're dealing with at the same time. And as we see often within the IDD population, there's a wide variety of language skills. So there's communication awareness. So like they're able to respond to names and understand yes and no, and then all the way up to communicating using refined language. And so in this part of the journey, you'll get to see different levels of communication and language skills.
So this is E. E is 9 years old. He started as a 3-year-old with this device. Since 3, so when he was about 8, he did get this new upgraded, updated technology, but the software and the language program pretty much remained consistent for him. And he is one that uses, well, you can decide what level he's at. Let's go.
I am scared of the sheep. I'm scared of the sheep.
You're scared of the sheep?
He did not like the sheep. He was at a carnival. But this is a child that understands the nuances of the English language. And he wants every single little word included. Where D, the one that uses the technology, if he's going to make a sentence, the amount of effort and work that it's going to take for him to use all those little words is not necessarily worth the effort. He just needs to get his point across. So sometimes you have to sacrifice. This is a child, this little guy, he has direct access. It's very easy for him. He's very quick. And so he can just tell you how he's feeling.
And even with the same child, right? Like, see, he also has autism. And so part of, I think, what you've been working on from the language side is being able to use that language flexibly and like in a lot of different scenarios.
Yep. So here he's just like playing games. I go to his house. It's summertime. We're not in school. And so we're playing games.
Yeah.
We'll play this video.
Yes. And in the context for this too is that like he normally tries to get out of situations by saying, "Is it time to go?" And so
yes. And this is a child too, by the way, that you had very significant SIB, self-injurious behaviors. And he has spent a good amount of the last 2 years with pages on his talker that allow for negotiations. Will you set a timer? How much longer do I have to do this? And like learning how to navigate and negotiate. And one of his negotiations is to, well, he's trying to get out of something by saying, "Is it time to go?" And I'm teaching him flexible other ways to communicate the same message.
Oh. Oops. I don't know why.
Yeah. Is it time for the next game?
It is time for the next game.
And so this is, we will be talking about him in depth next week about how to use all that language to help someone socially and strategically navigate their device, to try to minimize that. And this is another young girl named E, and this was kind of an old video, but she was learning at the time how to associate the fact that there's icons on the device and they mean really specific things. And so she was learning that, like, if you wanted to continue doing something, to say, let's go.
Oh my gosh, how fun is that? What do you think about that? Do you like it or not? Wait, can you tell me first? Do you like that?
Wow, cool. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Yay!
So she was having a really fun time. So it was teaching her, oh, if I really enjoy something, there's a specific message that means, wow, cool, this is fun. And then there's another message to say, hey, I want to keep going. How do I get there? And then be able to communicate, hey, let's go. So you see the breadth of different levels of language, and that you have to be able to teach based on their level of language that they have.
That goes back to the passport idea of knowing who they are and what they want and what they're like, where they are in their journey and their skills, and being able to adapt the talker accordingly.
And so, with kind of that in mind, we wanted to be able to highlight a client who is the reason that Kim started the practice.
Yes. So this student came to me. I was very involved in literacy as a speech language pathologist back in early 2000s. This mom found me, said, I want you to teach my child to read. And I said, okay. And she said, but she uses a talker. And I said, no, that's okay. I'm good. I got enough business. And she's like, no, just talk to her. Just talk to her once. And she came to me with her talker, and she started pushing buttons, and I fell in love. And that is how I fell in love with her and the whole idea of AAC. And I've learned so much since then. And that was back in 2006.
And one thing that's interesting with her profile that we wanted to talk about today is that she was one where it was just hard to imagine her being able to do anything operationally, because she has a number of rare disorders, including flavoprotein dehydrogenase deficiency and a mutation DNA01, which only like 200 people in the world have been diagnosed with that mutation. But essentially, what this deficiency is that, like, it reduces the amount of energy for the cells. And so that means that in terms of, being able to develop a motor plan or and using your muscles, it really inhibits that. And so this was after she received treatment of riboflavin vitamins, like she takes every day. So this was not long after she started, but you notice her low tone still. She is curving her feet to keep herself upright. She is finally able in this picture to keep her head upright as well. Before, she was all limp. And you can also see the low tone in her arms. The motor planning was a significant piece of this, because when she was in physical therapy and early intervention, they had to put her in splints and literally move each limb individually for her to learn how to crawl. Like, that was the extent of the need for her to develop a motor plan to be able to do a number of basic tasks like that. And it was then great. Then, like, as she went through early intervention, you can see here she has enough fine motor control to be able to put that spoon into that cup. And so there was a lot of work in the early days on being able to teach her the motor plans behind all of these basic life skills. But despite all of those years, developing the motor plan, verbal communication was just not an option for her. She did not have the motor plan for that. And so they spent a lot of time trying to figure out a way for her to be able to communicate. They used picture exchange systems. They had pictures all over their house. Nothing was working. And so she was 11. They were trying to find a system of communication. They heard about communication devices at the time, the family did, but they didn't know much about it. They went to a representative for a company, and they said, the only way you can know is to try. Just give it a try, just see how it works. And that's what they did.
So there was a long wait list for therapy. I had just started my practice, and she was my first go round. And we started at Target and Subway, because we had to find in her passport of who she was those were two really important things to her. And so we created a routine in which she went to Subway every week, multiple times a week. And we educated the staff at Subway so that they could navigate her process of going through the line using her talker. She was obsessed with Target. So she would pick things she wanted to use her talker to pick things she wanted to go look for and then communicate that. And then she would get to go look at the books or whatever it is she wanted at Target. That was also how we taught safety. We would walk away from her and she used a button that said, "Here I am," that actually yelled. We were able to turn the volume up on that button so that if she got lost and we could yell, hey, M, where are you? She could yell, "Here I am," and learn how to stay safe.
Let me just ask this question real quick. So you said she didn't have the motor plan to develop speech. And so are you saying that she didn't have the physical ability to do that in some manner? Maybe explain that just a little bit further.
When you think about how they put her in splints and moved each arm and leg so that she could learn to crawl, you can't get in somebody's mouth and place their articulators.
Right.
So her articulation system did not develop. So she cannot orally speak.
Right.
She can make noise. She's got a voice, but
Right.
she can't make any sounds.
Right. And she has a
Yeah.
couple of approximations, like OPA is kind of like her way of saying like open or help. But in terms of being able to functionally communicate everything that she needed to say, is just not possible. But because of the exposure and because of the amount they were out and about, she was able to participate in activities like here in the early days, trick-or-treating, that she didn't get to before.
Yeah.
So that was her saying trick or treat while she was in Halloween. And this is one of the early days of therapy with Kim.
Yes. So she needed to know where words were in her talker. She's obviously over time developed the ability to point. And so she would point and touch what she wanted to say.
And yeah, and I think one of the things that you'll see in this video that is interesting for me is that like there's pages that like I'm working with her on now that she goes through all the time. That's just a part of her motor plan, but that had to be developed. Just like the exposure of developing, this is where you find certain words. And so this is just an example.
Tickle. Tickle. All right, we're gonna tickle. Let's find our body parts. Let's see which body part we're gonna tickle. So I model body parts. Let's find the body parts out here. Let's find them. Here are things. Body parts. Those are animals. Things, body parts. There we go. Okay. I choose finger. Tickle my finger. Tickle my finger. There we go. You got it. So just having to go through the process to know where to find folders and to teach that motor plan through activities that are highly preferred. Like she loved to play the tickle game.
Mm-hmm. And that allows to like the opportunity to develop language by understanding operationally how do you use the device. And this was then the second device that she had.
Yep.
And what was the name of that device again?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna the Maestro. That was the Dynavox Maestro, and it was Mighty Maestro. It was very big.
But again, this principle of educate, incorporate, communicate. I think M's case is a great example of that because you spent so much time, with her, like educating, family educating people. Like she went volunteering, she was in schools, she was,
she's in an adult day program now where she goes and does life skills and communication skills and job skills. And we'll see how she's using her talker now. She started with me at 11. She's now 26.
And so, yeah. which is amazing. And so now here she is at a job site, and we developed a page that's based on the things that she needed at the job site. And what's been interesting, especially in the last couple years, is that even now in her mid 20s, her brain is still developing. And so she's been able to gain overall this like self-awareness of, oh, these are tasks that I need to do, right? And these are things that I need to be able to do the task. And so she was stocking shelves, and then she realized that she needed more.
I need more, please.
And so this is her like asking, like, hey, can you help me get more so I can stock more of the shelves? Like the awareness to be able to not only understand that, but then communicate it. That's a great step.
To answer your question, Janet, we work with her once a week. From the time she was 11 to 26, I'm pretty sure she hasn't missed more than 12 weeks. She's pretty consistent.
Yeah. This is also an example of her and I talking together. A lot of her communication, especially in the beginning, was phrase-based, just because of the way that she was able to process the language, but then also like because of the motor planning, it just like for a while she's done really well with phrase-based communication. So this is an interaction that she and I had back and forth where we were working on asking questions, and then I kind of noticed that she may not be interested in asking questions anymore, so giving her an opportunity to communicate that.
Did you want to ask me another question, or did you want to do something else?
I have a quick question. This is Salita. It looks to me like everything that we're seeing with these devices has the person looking at it upside down. I mean, is that not a
No, they're looking at it. The
okay?
perspective, that white bar at the top is the message window where
Okay,
all the words are going into that message window. It's like the sentence strip, I guess you could say.
okay.
No, so when she's looking at it in
Right
the,
side up. She's seeing it
Yeah.
like okay, all right.
the way we're seeing it, it's looking upside down in the pictures.
Right, but the way that she is, it's like,
Okay.
thanks for clarifying.
So, Lisa, you had a couple other comments and questions. Do you want to speak about those just for a moment?
We can.
Salita?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
were on
I had asked a little bit about you know, you work with individuals and their families, and you know, you've clearly been involved with this young lady for a long time, and I just wondered, you know, things happen, unexpected things happen. You know, if it hadn't worked out so well for this young lady, like if something had happened where she would have just not made it or expired, what is involved for the family in terms of like if you expect a lifelong relationship, which it sounds like you ladies, that's what you do. You sign up for life with these people. But if their life is cut short, then what do you offer, if anything, to their people? And it may not be that you're there yet. And I mean, it's still like an evolving thing. And
Yeah, it's definitely evolving, and I think it's really important. So for my she is a kid that I had or a young adult that I had for so long, and her expanse of what she was exposed to and the things that we went out and did. We went to the movies, we went shopping, we just did so much because I have the community based program. But at some point we had to pull back and say, okay, she's 26, her brain is ready. She's ready to start really developing some structured language where maybe she can start building some of these
right,
sentences, and she's not dependent on phrase based anymore. And that's Rita's expertise. So Rita 11 years later has taken her on, and I'm no longer seeing them. So I think change in perspective, I think change in approach, I think a new set of eyes, I think people with different skill sets. When I say lifelong, I think it's less about me or Rita being lifelong, but setting the family up to understand that they're going to be advocating for the life of the time that the user
Right.
is using a device.
Mhm.
And so
Okay.
instead of teaching them, here's this one skill you can learn, yay, you did it. What's next? It's more like, what's the long-term plan? Where do
Right.
you want this user to be using their device? And let's go explore it and experience it and practice it and try it multiple times over and over and commit. It's that making that commitment.
Right. And I guess since we only have a couple minutes left, I think this is kind of a perspective that you're kind of hinting at too. I guess first, real quick, this is just some of the reading that we're doing, where like now that she's able to understand more of the individual words, we've been learning more about verbs and like the importance of verbs, because now she's able to make her own sentence. So in that first video, she was able to say, I want reading, that she wants to read.
Yeah.
We've been able to do working on books. So like her actually being able to flexibly use language enough to be able to say like I put on, like starting to use those individual words and understanding that you can put little words together to make all different kinds of sentences, to the point where spontaneously in one session she put together the sentence that said this.
I love reading.
Oh, I'm so glad you love reading.
And so, she's able to express joy. She's able to like tell her mom, I feel love, mom. Like that's like the way, like before she wasn't able to do that. And I think part of what's important in terms of thinking about the long-term success of our anybody that uses a communication device is just the importance of education, not only to their team, not only to the family, but just in the general public. One, because like her day program has now understood, like, she can, use complete sentences. She can say names to get people's comments. They're more educated now, and they've been able to help advocate for other people in their program to get communication devices. Right. And so because they're aware, they can help to advocate for that. I think, unfortunately, and this is, I think it just happens everywhere, and I know we've been a part of it too. There's been so many people that, don't know that this sort of journey is possible, right? And so, I guess, for instance, like this family was told in the very beginning, don't bother with early intervention, just take her home. This family was also told she doesn't have any sort of short-term memory. She can't learn, or she can't be in the mainstream classroom. She's too low functioning to use a touchscreen computer. Like this is not from like the outside world. This is from
Healthcare professionals.
right. And I mean, like, and we're all like, I mean, everybody.
I said no, thank you when I first heard, so I'm fully guilty. And
right. And so I think in terms of your question, like, does the lifelong journey look like? I think it's not just about any one person. It's a whole community. Like to get on the plane, you have to get to the airport. You have to go through the airport. I think the more that everyone's aware of opportunities that are available and like building on that, the more people can get on this journey. I mean, just thinking about her quality of life, it's improved a lot because the family said, I think there's more that she can do, and let's advocate for that.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a phrase that I learned a long time ago from Winston Churchill: never, never, never give up. Because you really do have to work your way through a lot of fits and starts before you get to the end of your journey, don't you?
that's right.
Definitely. And so, yeah, and I think that's some of the things that we'll talk about. If anybody has questions, we would love to be able to take the time next week to be able to dive deeper into that. And I think that's part of like the journey of, just knowing that this family was very motivated and was really gung-ho and really fought in every step, because they were educated and they knew, right? But then it's also realizing that like what are things that we can do to help facilitate that journey, so every step isn't a fight, and I think part of it is just like the acceptance and knowing that people can communicate with devices and it looks all different ways, but we can help to make that possible if we all work together.
Well, outstanding. Thank you so much for being here this week, and you're going to be our guest again next week, so we're not losing this opportunity. Babs, please save the questions that we didn't get answered today so that we can maybe start with those questions next time. I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Rita, for being our guest today and for also being our guest next week. And this is the Political Consultation Network. We do it every Tuesday at 12:30. So I hope everybody will join, and also invite all your friends to join. And we will see you again next week.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Can you keep that?
Yeah.
All right.
So long, everybody.